Iowa.
And poultry plants open. And we've partnered, I'm proud to say, with the great companies represented here, deployed CDC personnel to meat processing plants that have been impacted. We've deployed personal protective equipment. We've given counsel about safe operations. We've really had two goals. Number one is the safety of the workers, safety and the health of the people that are out there working hard every day and to keep food on the table. And the other goal is to keep the plants open. And I'm proud to report that the USDA just announced a few hours ago that 14 meat processing plants will be resuming operations, Governor. In fact, 2 here in Iowa. Both of them are Tyson's, Perry, and in Waterloo. And how about a big round of applause for all these great meat processing plants that have stepped up and partnered with us to keep our food supply strong. So with that, I'm gonna stop. I'm here to listen, and I hope I have a chance, with proper social distancing, to meet as many of you as possible, because I really am grateful and I'm really inspired by the example that each one of you have shown, whether it's the people working the cash register at a grocery store, whether it's the truckers putting in the long miles. Each one of you have been a part of our one mission, one team approach. You know, when the President tapped me to lead the White House Coronavirus Task Force, he said, I want a whole-of-government approach. We very quickly partnered with every governor in the country, every state and every territory. We marshaled the full resources of the federal government. But what was clear to me early on was what President Trump was really talking about was a whole-of-America approach. And what we've seen in a broad range of areas, including our food supply, is the American people have stepped up in every area of our economy and done what needed to be done. And I just really came here to pay a debt of gratitude and a debt of thanks to all of you who've done your part. We're going to get through this, and history will record that we got through this as one nation, as a people that put the health and well-being of our people first. We made the sacrifices, we rolled our sleeves up, we did the work, and we put America back to work. And I really do believe, as President Trump often says, when we come through this, we're going to come through Iowa and America stronger and more prosperous than ever before. So thank you very much. God bless you. And God bless each and every one of you for the work you've done throughout this epidemic.
Yeah, now I'd like to just take a moment and turn it over to our great governor, Governor Reynolds, to say a few words.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that very much. Mr. Vice President, welcome back to Iowa. It's an honor to have you here. I personally just want to say thank you for your leadership and the President's leadership throughout the coronavirus pandemic. I can tell you firsthand the responsiveness, the leadership, the timeliness from the weekly calls with the governors, where we have an opportunity to learn firsthand the new things that are available, how we can access PPE, testing, across the board, and then just an opportunity to tell you what's going on in our states and ask for maybe some assistance if we need some at the time. So I appreciate the leadership, I appreciate the collaboration and the partnership, and we're very grateful to have you in the state of Iowa. Randy, I also want to thank HyVee for hosting today, but most importantly, I want to thank all our grocers for the role that you've played to keep your doors open, your shelves stocked, and your employees and your customers safe during this really critical time. And to kind of echo what the Vice President said, to all of the industry, from the farmers to the processors to the truckers to the frontline workers in our grocery stores, just a heartfelt thank you for doing all that you're doing to keep our food supply chain open and moving. We appreciate it so much. The last several months, and it's hard to believe it has been 2 months. I sometimes just have to stop and just think about that. It's hard to even grasp. Has been some of the most challenging times for many of us. In just a couple of months, we've learned a lot about how COVID-19 is spread, what we can do to slow that spread, and the responsibility of each of us and the role that we play in being a part of the solution. You know, with Iowa's role in feeding the world, I'm proud to say that 10% of the nation's food supply is grown by our Iowa farmers. And because of that, during this COVID crisis, nearly 80% of our businesses and workforce was deemed essential and has remained open to keep the food food supply chain moving and food on the table. Wednesday, I had the opportunity to go to the White House and visit with the President, the Vice President, Secretary Perdue was there, as well as the Coronavirus Task Force. And it was an opportunity for me to highlight the mitigation efforts that we put in place to protect the health of Iowans, to really manage our resources. It was an opportunity for us to talk about our efforts to ramp up large-scale testing with our Test Iowa initiative, our really robust case investigation process. We were able to talk about how we've increased testing by almost 800% in just 2 months, and we're able to now test and process about 5,000 a day. And in Iowa, on a per capita basis, we have tested 1 in 44 Iowans, and we're going to continue to see that number come down. We've deployed strike teams of public health professionals into long-term care facilities, our manufacturing and processing facilities. We're doing community test sites to do surveillance testing. We're doing diagnostic and serology testing. On April 22nd, we actually had partnered with 115 long-term care facilities. Since then, we've tested 11,200 employees and residents and over 10,000 manufacturing and food processing employees. And Tyson and Smithfield have been a couple of the partners that we've been able to work with in our state to really provide the testing, and we hope to do another 10,000 in the next 2 weeks. So we really are ramping up and really working with our processing facilities across the state. The surveillance testing has really helped us identify the positive cases, the negative cases, isolate that workforce, get them on a road to recovery, separate the shifts, and just to partner with the protections that you're putting in the facilities and all that you're doing to make sure that your workforce is safe and healthy. And it really does, I think, help provide the employees with the confidence to get back in there and do the job that they want to be doing to keep the food supply moving. Also, because of the assessments, the testing, and the robust case investigation, it has allowed us to begin to ease some of our mitigation efforts and really move to containing and managing virus activity so that we can safely and responsibly opening up our economy while protecting the health and livelihood of Iowans. I'm so grateful to the Trump administration's support throughout this time, especially for the defense PA. That really brought some conformity in keeping the processing plants open and operating. Your ability to help us obtain PPE testing, supply, and distribution from the Abbott machines to the reagents to the serology testing has been greatly appreciated. So I just want to kind of close by again thanking you for your partnership and leadership in this effort. I want to take this opportunity, though, since I've got the Secretary of Ag here and the Vice President here, to just say we're extremely grateful for the CARES funding to support our farmers and ranchers, and want to take a look at the payment limitations and asking if those be lifted to serve all of our Iowa producers, but really appreciate everything that both of you have been doing throughout this process. So I think we believe, too, it's an all-hands-on deck. And in your words, Mr. Vice President, it is an all-of-government response. So thank you for that. I appreciate it very much, and we look forward to continue to partner with you as we move through this. So today's conversation is an important one, and as we continue to work together to develop solutions, I think we're going to get started with our great Secretary of Agriculture. We welcome you back, too. Iowa's we're not a stranger to you. You're here often, and we appreciate that. And Sonny, with that, we'll turn it over to you. And again, appreciate your leadership through this as well.
Thank you, Governor Reynolds and Mr. Vice President, and our host, Randy. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. I think every crisis probably brings its own language. I'm not sure how many Americans really had used the words food supply chain before this happened.
Right.
Didn't even think about it because, frankly, as Americans, we've been pretty spoiled in having the most efficient, the most effective, the least cost food and available in so many choices of any developed country in the world. And frankly, we've taken that for granted. I don't think we take it for granted as much now as we did, but a supply chain is exactly what it has. A lot of links in it, and these links have been strong and resilient, although, as you mentioned, Mr. Vice President, there have been challenges, but I applaud this overall supply chain. We've got vendors' inputs to our producers. Obviously, our farmers and ranchers have been there producing this great food, but then in order to be consumable, it has a lot of other things to have happen. And that's who we have here today, men and women who've worked in this supply chain to process and to package and to deliver and to logistics and stocking those shelves and checking people out so we could consume that food. The interesting thing, and I believe I'm guilty of this, I never quite understood the dual track supply chain that we had developed in this country by efficiency. When we think about over half of our calories being consumed now outside of the home, and almost immediately that was stopped with restaurants, congregate feeding, institutional feeding, and others. That was part of the relocation and misalignment that happened here in our economy. But these people in the supply chain have just moved mountains in order to realign that in so many ways. But that we never thought about that very much. Even in the processing and packaging, these folks had different lines for institutional buyers and customers versus grocers like HyVee and Kroger. And so they had to make a lot of adjustments and a lot of adaptations in that way in order to realign that. We heard the horror stories about dumping milk or euthanizing pigs or plowing under vegetables, and that's heartbreaking, obviously. It's financially distressing, but it's also heartbreaking for a producer to have food and animals that they produce for consumption not to be able to utilize in that food chain. And so we appreciate all of them, but this dual track really had us scrambling. And I know initially for HyVee and Kroger and all the retailers, this national hurricane warning we had at the initial, and your panic buying, the shelves started getting, and that increases the panic. But you all very quickly continue to just do what you'd always done and get these shelves back stocked because of the warehousing capability you had in doing that. That gave the public a lot of confidence. It took about 7 to 10 days for people to realize there's going to be more food there. There's going to be food, and you and your workers did a great job doing that in that way. The challenges we've had obviously have come in our processing and packing operations with our protein processors, and they've done a marvelous job in poultry and Ronnie and Mount Ayr, and our pork industry and Smithfield and Tyson, JBS, and others, and also in our beef plants as well, Cargill and others, in doing that. So this has been a tremendous effort, a miraculous effort by all those folks to get this done. I want to tell you that your identification, you're in the President's identification of this food supply chain as critical infrastructure, and for its workers was hugely important early on. We were scrambling, and we needed clear direction, and you all provided that. I think, again, you've been on the phone with these folks several times, because I know I've been there with you in your conversation, meeting with them and in the White House as well as on the phone, helping to continue to evolve the right solutions. That solution that came about was the executive order that you and the President issued regarding the critical infrastructure of these meat processing with the dual role, as you said. We have to have healthy and safe workers in our plants in order to continue the health of the safety of our food supply. And that's exactly what it did, using the gold standard of CDC guidance as well as OSHA guidance for the working conditions there. And these men and women, these plants have done an amazing job complying with that, getting these plants back open as quickly as possible, and I think we'll continue. I told the President when Governor Reynolds was there Wednesday, I think we've turned the corner. We had a little challenge last week, but this week these plants are coming back online. I think while HyVee and other retailers may not have the amount of variety that they would like to have or usually have right now, I think they will have that pretty soon coming back, and your customers will be there comforted again that the chain is unbroken in that way. I know others have mentioned the threats, but I do believe, based on all the good efforts here, in my opinion, this chain is sound, it's solid, and it's a great testament to the innovation and creativity and the perseverance of the American worker.
Great. Well said.
Okay, with that, we'd ask Senator Grassley if you'd like to make some comments.
I'd sure love that opportunity. Taking off where Secretary Perdue left off about the sophistication and the precision of our supply chain from the farmer to your mouth. It reminds me, for decades I've heard the old saying that you're only 9 meals away from rioting for food. And you read about people fighting over toilet paper at the supermarket to get the last roll of toilet paper, so you could imagine how people would be fighting if they couldn't get the food they want. So Senator Ernst and I represent 88,000 family farmers where all this starts. And over the 5 weeks in isolation on the family farm when the Senate wasn't in session until this week, probably 90% of the phone calls I dealt with were from farmers, either their advocacy groups or the individual farmers. And so whether it's those 88,000 farmers or my own son, Robin, who's been farming for 40 years, where I started 6 years ago, you hear a lot of distress. There is economic distress, obviously, with the low prices, but there's also emotional distress, particularly when you're a pig farmer talking about euthanizing 300-pound hogs. It gets your attention right away. You know, you take calls from beef producers, pork producers, poultry people. Hey, we're big in eggs in Iowa, depopulating their flocks as an example. Or you talk to a soybean farmer or corn farmer. Right now, in our local elevator, corn's $2.70. I farmed during the 1960s when corn was between 98 cents and $1.04 for a whole 10 years. And you could buy a tractor for $15,000. The price for corn farmers lower now than it was then. And you don't know whether the 98% of the people in this country that aren't farmers understand what a farmer's going through. But when the Audubon beef producer calls me up and says, you're going to be with the vice president tomorrow, well, you tell him two things. One, we're losing a lot of money on cattle. And number two, that he appreciates reading this week that Trump was going to get a hold of the Attorney General and say, we got to investigate and find out if there's any sort of a violation of law in the pricing of this stuff and the things of that. So they appreciate President Trump speaking up for them. And I think all the farmers that I talked to on the phone, that I had an opportunity to say to them that with these problems that we have representing Iowa farmers, that you have a chance to talk to Secretary Perdue probably 5 times on the phone during that period of time, or talking to the vice president about it, or talking to the president about it, or talking to the chief of staff for the president of the United States. I think they appreciate getting their voices heard and feel good about it. But you just can't appreciate enough the economic distress that comes from these low prices, but also the emotional distress that comes from it. And remember, this all starts at the family farm, and the extent to which there are processors all over the country that can help us explain how come when people almost cry to us, how come we're losing hundreds of dollars on our cattle and the price of consumers are going up. It's just hard for them to understand that. And it seems to me that there are people that ought to be not only sharing that distress, but they ought to be explaining how some of these anomalies can happen. So I guess I would end with basically farmers are usually very optimistic. And for the best planting season we've had in 10 years, and for soybeans since 1974, you might hear a little bit less of it right now. But things aren't very good out there on the farm. And we have to produce and for you to eat, so we don't have worry about being 9 meals away from rioting. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
All right. Now we'd ask our Senator Joni Ernst if you'd say a few words.
Thank you very much, Randy. And Mr. Vice President, certainly thank you once again for taking the time to visit Iowa and to hear the concerns that are coming from so many of the greatest Americans that we have. So I appreciate it. Secretary Perdue, thank you so much. It is a blessing. I will just tell everybody, it is a blessing that we have the leadership that we do during such a dark time. I, of course, have the opportunity to reach out anytime I need to visit with one of our most senior leaders in our federal government. And so those conversations with President Trump, those conversations with Vice President Pence, certainly the many calls I've been on with Secretary Perdue, thank you for your time and attention. The collaboration between our federal level, our federal government, and our state government under the leadership of Governor Kim Reynolds, extraordinary. So I want to thank you very much, Governor, as well. I would say that through those conversations, and they've been very hard conversations because I have heard from so many of you in the conversations sitting in my house down in Red Oak, Iowa, you know, visiting with everybody over teletown halls or conference calls or Zoom meetings, and hearing the distress in the voice coming from our beef cattle producers, our dairy farmers, our egg and poultry farmers, especially our hog farmers, even those folks engaged in row crops and biofuels like ethanol. And it's very hurtful, I think, for all of us, especially those of us in leadership that are really crying to be heard broadly across the United States with our colleagues as to what our American farmer and rancher is going through. We do have leaders that understand that. And again, I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for the many, many conversations that I have had with all of you and the organizations you represent. I would say that what we are seeing right now in not only the state of Iowa, but across the Midwest and our country as a whole is what I would describe as a great awakening as to where their basics come from, their food. You know, it is essential to every individual to have food on their table. And we have a lot more people that understand that that food is coming out of the heartland or any other agricultural community that exists across the United States, whether it's the meat that we are producing here in Iowa, whether it is turnips in another state or potatoes from Idaho or Maine. People are understanding where their food is coming from. And I really think this is an opportunity for us to capitalize on that and really talk about our food supply chain. And it was one of the conversations I had with the Vice President, really in the possibility of establishing a White House Office of Supply Chain, so that we know where our food comes from in difficult times and in good times, and then other things that we need to make sure that we are a secure nation, whether it's our pharmaceuticals, whether it's PPE, whatever that might happen to be. But we as Americans really need to educate others on where our food comes from, and we're starting to see that right now. So I am blessed to have the opportunity to take your information and direct it to the folks that really have been very helpful to us through what I would call a very big crisis across our farming communities. We, with Senator Grassley's great leadership, have been able to pass a number of very important provisions through the CARES Act, whether it was dollars going to USDA through the CCC, whether it's the payroll protection program that some of our smaller farmers have been able to engage in, any number of programs out there. But we know that we need to find innovation. We need to find other ways of doing business too. And so I'm asking for those really helpful conversations as we move forward on what ways we can focus on closing the gap that Senator Grassley talked about with our cattle pricing, whether it is finding a way to keep our meat packing facilities open and safe for workers to return and get fully operational. Whatever those conversations are going to be, I look forward to having them with you. And believe me, we feel it all across the state and the nation. My family, a number of my family members, my sister and brother-in-law, do most of our family farming now, but we're hearing it from corner to corner in the great state of Iowa. Everyone has been impacted. So God bless you all. Thank you so much for the information that you were able to provide to all of us during this very, very stressful and distressing time. Your voices truly are being heard, and hopefully we are able to act. So thank you for what you continue to do. God bless you.
Randy, if I could interject before we hear from these great industry leaders, I hope the people of Iowa have a sense, the President and I have, just how fortunate you are. Senator Grassley and Senator Ertz have been great partners in forging a bipartisan consensus on Capitol Hill very early on. Everything the President was asking for in terms of accommodations for families, support for businesses, making sure that the Paycheck Protection Program extended to not just to small businesses around America, but Senator Ernst, the way you championed that nonprofits, including religious organizations, would also be able to maintain payroll. They've really been extraordinary partners in that regard. And Senator Grassley, the way you've championed agriculture and food supply throughout this has been seminal to formulating the administration's policies and approach. And I just have to say, Randy, that Iowa's been leading the way with Governor Kim Reynolds. From very early on, the strong steps of mitigation efforts have made a difference here. We grieve the loss of life here in Iowa, but the numbers speak for themselves. The outbreak in Iowa has not been like we've seen in other states and other metropolitan areas around the country. It's a tribute to your early, strong steps. The partnership that we forged with your governor to make sure our healthcare workers had the personal protective equipment resulted in literally hundreds of thousands of supplies flowing on a regular basis. On the testing issue, I just had to mention it because she talked about it before. As of today, I'm proud to report the public-private partnership the President forged with laboratories around the country in February. We had done roughly 8,000 coronavirus tests. As of this morning, we've done 8.1 million coronavirus tests. And Iowa's been leading the way with Test Iowa and scaling up and increasing. You said nearly 5,000 people a day being tested. States around the country are emulating what Governor Reynolds has done in expanding testing. And then lastly, just as the President a few weeks ago called on states around the country to begin to consider plans to open up America again, Governor Reynolds has put together a thoughtful, careful, responsible proposal that's already begun to loosen restrictions that were placed on a number of counties across Iowa. And I just want to say, Governor, you're very generous to the President and to me, but we just couldn't be more grateful for your senators, for their partnership, but we couldn't be more grateful to Governor Kim Reynolds for really not just leading Iowa, but having Iowa help lead the nation through these challenging times. So thank you again, Governor. Thanks for that, Randy.
You bet, absolutely. Now, so we would like to hear from Zippy Duval, the CEO of American Farm Bureau Federation. Zippy?
Mr. Vice President, thank you for having me today.
Good to see you, Zippy.
Good to see you. Good to see you. I would tell you that, Governor, that when I talk to your farmers, they are very pleased with the way you've handled this. They are very proud of you. And I could say amen to these two senators for what they said, because I'm going to repeat some of what you said, but it's important to say the things that you said. And my friend, Secretary Perdue from Georgia down there, we've been friends for a long time. I know what his heart's full of, and it's full of love, and it's full of doing the right thing, and I really have enjoyed and appreciate working with him. But our farmers and ranchers couldn't ask for a better friend than the President and the Vice President of our country this day and time. I told you last week on the phone that I was proud to be an American. I'm proud to be an American just about every day. But today, for some reason, I'm more proud than I've ever been to be an American, because I see people working together, and in a bad situation, the good coming out in people. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation, and it appears that the public is thinking about what the food chain looks like. A perfect example of that, I was coming from the airport yesterday afternoon. I had traveling yesterday to be here today, and I got in a cab, and the cab had plexiglass between me and the cabbie. And he turned to me and he says, "What do you think this economy is going to do?" And I said, "Well, I think it'll take off and we'll get right back where we were." I said, "That's my hopes and prayers." I said, "What do you fear in this pandemic more than anything?" He said, "The ability to keep my job."
Yeah.
I said, "What's your second biggest fear in this pandemic?" And he said, "There being food in the grocery store for me to feed." He said, "We need to take care of our farmers." So I know that we do have a new awareness across this country of what food means to them. You can take everything in our life away from us, but if you take water and food away from us, nothing else really makes a difference. And we all know that that's what keeps armies in their bases, because when people get hungry, that's when they go to fighting. And we don't want to see that here in America. Farmers, we thank you for having this seat at this table, because when you talk about a food chain, we are the very first link in that chain. Without those thousands and millions of farmers out there doing what they do each and every day, there's nothing to process, there's no chain to carry it on. We are committed. Each farmer across this country is committed to fighting this pandemic and being a partner with the President and you, Mr. Vice President, and all the elected officials to make sure that we win this fight against this pandemic. Since the food service industry and the cafeterias and the schools, restaurants closed, this hit our family farms hard. It's in a very difficult time. We have one of the greatest economies in history, but the economy on the farm still wasn't really good. And we've been suffering at least almost a decade, 7 or 8 years, with half of our income gone and fighting terrible disasters. I call it the perfect storm that we've experienced, and now in this perfect storm, one of those elements is this pandemic. We understand the frustration of the public when they go and find grocery shelves empty, and food banks not supplied like they should be. We've reached out to Feeding America and wrote the letter to the Secretary and asked him to start some sort of voucher program where we could help get food that were being destroyed and plowed under to get it to the food banks to where somebody could at least use it. And I understand he's going to have a part of that program come out, and we have people from companies from around the country call our organization almost daily wanting to play a role in that and be able to provide, whether it be extra cooling facilities or whether it be trucking or whatever that might be. We have those calls just about every week, and it brings the good out in Americans. But that frustration that comes from those empty shelves is very terrible, and we understand where the public is at when they feel that frustration. So understanding that frustration, we should be able to learn how to tell them more about how their food is produced and how it is processed before it gets to them. This is not a supply issue. It's a supply chain issue. And we've tried our best as an organization to work with these companies around this table, with the President in the executive order, to make sure that we get it to a workable level. But it's our top priority, too, to make sure that the workers on our farm, the workers in these plants, and the workers in the grocery stores and in the food chain, all of them are protected. It's got to be our number one priority to make sure that they are protected and make sure their families are protected. We do have serious concerns about the potential market manipulation when it comes to the prices that farmers are feeding. We're frustrated about the disparity between the rock bottom prices that we're receiving and some sky-high wholesale prices that we see being charged. So we're very appreciative of the comments the President made this week about the Justice Department doing an investigation. We're very appreciative of CTC and USDA and their investigations. We look forward to seeing the results of those investigations. The farmers and ranchers are coming unhinged when they see that difference in that price because they're facing losing their farms.
Right.
And it is a very difficult thing to explain. One of the things I'm really concerned about coming in the future is what's going to happen to corn and our corn producers. If you just think about where they're at right now, with all the ethanol plants that's closed down,
Right.
the senators could tell me better about how much of that corn in the Corn Belt actually goes to ethanol. But that infrastructure was built to help our country become energy sufficient, that we not have to depend on foreign countries. And that infrastructure has played a major role, and it is an infrastructure that supports rural communities and it supports farmers. But they've lost that production. Most of those plants have closed down. 40%. Wow. 40%. And that is a serious thing. But couple the corn farmers' problem with what our hopes was in the Phase 1 deal with China. We don't know what's going to come out of that. We had high hopes, and now we're wondering whether or not the President's going to be able to keep their feet to the fire and make them come good on their commitments of buying $40 billion worth of agricultural products. And then couple that with the lost production of processing of animals, those animals that need to be fed corn. They need to be fed byproducts that come from ethanol production. But if there's less animals being fed to be processed, there's going to be less corn fed. Yeah. So the corn farmer's going to get a triple whammy, and it is not going to be bright in their future. And we want to do something to try to change that and make sure that we stay energy independent, that our corn farmers are there to supply that and be able to feed our livestock and continue to do things that we do. The processing plant challenges not only affects meat, but it affects dairy and fruits and vegetables also. It's a direct impact on our farmers. When farmers have to plow under their crop, it's just like men and women taking their paycheck and throwing it in front of that plow and plowing it under. When farmers are faced with a decision to euthanize an animal, it is gut-wrenching. It is just gut-wrenching to know that you've spent all your time and care caring for that animal, and so no one's going to be able to utilize it. So it is absolutely essential that we continue to do all the great things that you're already doing to find a solution to those problems and figure out and make sure that we can get them back to 100% capacity. Because anything less than that supply chain below the processors is backing up. And that means the farmer is suffering because of that. We appreciate the focus that the President and you have put on agriculture. I have some very talented staff that work at American Farm Bureau that's been in Washington for 40 years. Been in USDA, been in the White House, worked with senators and congressmen across the Hill. And they said, they used to have to fight, scratch, tooth and nail, just to get the President of the United States to mention farmers or agriculture. This President, you mention us every day. So we couldn't ask for a better friend than we have in the White House today. We're very appreciative of the trade mitigation package that y'all delivered to us during the trade war. We're very appreciative to the Congress, the senators here. I want you to hear that we really appreciate the CARES package and the wonderful job that I know that my friend Sonny Perdue is going to do in delivering that out to our farmers. I am sorry to say that in all of that, it still doesn't come close to covering the cost of farmers during this epidemic and during the trade war. But it is a great lifeline. It will keep a lot of our farmers on the farm, and we're so appreciative of that. We look forward to continuing the discussions with Congress as we move forward into the next package. hopefully that we can fill some of the spots that didn't get filled. I'm a poultry producer. I know that there probably isn't going to be anything in the CARES package for a poultry producer, where some of those poultry chickens have been euthanized. Downtime in between batches are going to be stretched out. We're going to have poultry farmers that could possibly lose their farms because there's not going to be animals on their farm to raise. So we look forward to having additional conversations of what we can do to make sure that that first link in the most important chain in our lives stays well, healthy and well, so that we can continue to feed the American people and a lot of the people around the world. We're just so grateful for the men and women that's sitting out here. You know, the people that go to the grocery store every day, a lot of them young people, very young people, truckers, people stocking shelves, people taking care of our families in health care. These people that work for these processing plants, they're all heroes. But our American farmers are heroes too. And we know that we're all in this together. And the only way we're going to win this battle is being true-blooded, patriot Americans working together to make sure that we answer the call and answer the questions and solve the problems so that America can get back on its feet and go forward. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Senators. And thank you, Governor. Your state's proud of y'all.
Zippy, thank you. Hearing you speak makes me proud to be an American.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thanks for the words of encouragement and your leadership. American Farm Bureau has just been an indispensable partner of this administration from its first day, but especially at such a time as this. So thank you, Zippy. And before we go to the next industry leader, you mentioned some of those great people, and I have a few of them I'm told are here that I wanted to single. One of those truck drivers, I'm told, Randy,
Yes.
is from Charlton Distribution Center, became the first driver in HyVee history to reach the 3 million mile mark for miles driven without a preventable accident. He's been in delivery food supplies to communities in need throughout this pandemic. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Harold Major. Can we give Harold a round of applause? Can you stand up, Harold, and take a bow? Great job. 3 million miles. Harold, I was with one of your compatriots at the Walmart Distribution Center about a month and a half ago, and America owes a debt of gratitude to our truckers. And so thank you. Thanks for keeping the food supply rolling on 18 wheels. We're truly grateful. Also, I'm told, Randy, there's an intern at the Mills Civic HyVee Pharmacy here in West Des Moines who actually took it upon herself to call a local nursing home once a week to check in on residents' prescriptions and grocery needs. She makes sure they just have what they need. And to me, that was an incredibly inspiring, reaching out to people that we know fall in the category of the most vulnerable. But Grace Dolan, where are you? Grace, I wanted to get a round of applause for you. Great job. Wow. Thank you so much. Thanks for being there. And I'm proud to tell you, just this week, at the President's direction, we're delivering medical equipment to all 15,400 nursing homes in America. And it'll be the first of a series of supplies that are going. But thanks for being there for them as well locally. Yeah, we're proud of you. Great job. And finally, a HyVee courtesy clerk, who I learned about a few weeks back. And I actually was so inspired by his example that I tweeted it. Which is a pretty serious thing these days. He happens to have Down syndrome, but he's been working steadily at the Oakdale, Minnesota location, Randy, throughout this epidemic, showed up for work every day. But as the story goes, the day came that he dumped the contents of his piggy bank on the kitchen counter and started counting and came up with $28 in coins and bills. And he put them in an envelope that he sent to the President and the Congress with simply a message that said, "For all the people to help with coronavirus." And we got his $28, but we are so inspired by his example and his love. He's here with his mother, Patsy. But Stephen Ewell, where are you, man? You did a great job, and you're doing a great job for America. Great job, buddy. What a great guy. Thank you, Randy. Thank you to everybody, to Stephen and to Grace and to Harold. Great job. What did he say?
He said thank you, Mr.
Oh, no.
President.
Thank you. I'm going to swing down there and say hi to all of you before I slip away. Really proud of you all. Randy, go ahead.
So as we move on, we're running a little short on time, and the Vice President's going to have to keep moving here. So I would just go to our other folks here on the panel and see if there's anything you'd like to add into what we've had. And I'll start with great CEO of Tyson Foods over here, one of our great suppliers, Noel White.
So, Randy, I'll keep my remarks brief, so thank you. First of all, thank you for hosting us today. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Secretary, our senators. Thank you so much. Particular thanks to our Governor Reynolds. You've been a tremendous partner for us to work with over the course of the last 2 months. And the safety of our team members are paramount to us. And without your involvement providing the test, supported by the federal government, the PPE that you've been able to provide has been paramount to us, enabling to get back to work in the number of facilities that you mentioned. There's 2 in the state of Iowa that you talked about. There's 3 others in 3 other states that are going back to work this week. And it's with our great appreciation, the level of involvement that each of you have had in us getting back to work and maintaining work. So thank you so much for all of your efforts.
Well, join me in thanking Tyson Food for putting the safety of their workers first and putting the food supply rolling in America. Great job, man. Thank you. Great news today here in Iowa. I know the governor's excited about it. We appreciate all the team's hard work standing those processing plants up again, really.
I don't think anybody's more excited about that than I am, so I appreciate that too. Next, we'll go over to the CEO of Smithfield Foods, Ken Sullivan. Ken.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, first I want to apologize for being underdressed. I'm the only one here without a tie. There's a reason for that. I was across town at one of our plants in Des Moines. And I'd like to use the time I've got to thank our employees who are heroes. Everyone sort of takes for granted that grocery stores should be open. Policemen should be on the job. Doctors and nurses on the job. But for some reason, meatpacking plants, people don't fully understand or appreciate that. So I just want to take a moment for everyone to understand that if a grocery store has got to be open, it has to have food in it.
That's right.
And our employees have been showing up day after day in close quarters. They've been harvesting the animals. They've been keeping the food supply in this country. And they're doing it in a selfless way. And I think they deserve a lot of recognition for that. It's gut-wrenching for us as companies to have a choice between maintaining the food supply in this country and asking our employees to go into plants to do that. I got a call right before we came on here of an employee that we lost. So I just want the American people to know that these employees really deserve a lot of gratitude. That's all.
Ken, I'm sorry for your loss. I hope you convey our deepest sympathies to the family of that employee, but I appreciate the strength of emotion in your voice. And the American people are grateful. They're grateful for the people that have been coming to work every day at our meat processing plants throughout this epidemic. They've absolutely been essential to this nation's response. And I hope you'll tell your whole team how grateful we all are. So thank you so much.
All right, next we'd like to hear from the CEO of Mount Air, Ron Cameron. Ron?
Thank you, Randy. I just want to start with thanking you, Vice President Pence and Sonny Perdue, for the way that you have gotten involved personally and worked with the governors and recognized the importance of this link in the supply chain of all the links, including the one that I'm primarily involved in is in the processing. And starting with President Trump's executive order, I think it brought attention to the fact that, like doctors and nurses and hospitals, the people in the food supply chain are essential to our life, and essential to the well-being of the people. And you have continued to work through the difficult issues of balancing the care and concern for every person, as well as keeping us in business to be able to do that. When the easy thing might be to say, just shut it down and let everybody go sit at home, and everybody would lose. And so I just want to personally thank you for that, and for your involvement. We're not through this fight yet, but there's been a lot of progress, and we see how where we have been able to put the separations in the plant and protect the people and check the temperatures and enforce all of the social distancing possible, and yet still maintain the environments that we can create a safe environment, and we can help the people understand better, so that even when they leave our workplace, that they can practice good hygiene habits at home and outside the workplace. And so we've been able to see how this has reduced and is eliminating the virus spread, and where we haven't had spread within the plant, we're seeing it be effective in helping the communities where the people in our plants live, and where they do all of their social activities that sometimes are difficult for them to let go of, and sometimes it's difficult for them to adjust to. So, but without the focus that you've put on it, and the involvement that you've had, and the time you've spent, we would not be able to provide the food in the stores. And when we see empty shelves in the grocery stores, it reminds me of pictures of Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed. And the people in the Soviet Union, or in Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed, were scared, they were hungry, there was starvation, and it was not good. And I think the leadership that you and President Trump and Secretary Perdue and each member of the Senate and the House that are contributing to these efforts, as well as every governor of every state that has to deal directly, with the individual situations, the leadership that you're giving, is making the difference and allowing us to have a future much like we had just several months ago. And so I'm very optimistic that as states are opening up and people are starting back, we're going to see us come back stronger than we've ever been before. You know, it just wouldn't happen without the effort that you're putting in, and I just want to personally thank you for that. And thank you on behalf of all of our people and all the people throughout the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Ronnie, it's a great company. We appreciate you. We appreciate you very much. Very humbled by those words. But it's I hope you all hear in the voices of these great, massive companies that are involved in meat processing and food supply, the deep love they have for their employees, and we appreciate the efforts that we just worked through in Delaware with your company and the public spirit that you brought to it. So thank you, Ronnie. Good to see you.
Thank you, Ron. And last but not least, one of the great leaders in our industry in the retail food business, a very innovative leader, Rodney McMullen from Kroger. Rodney.
Thanks, Randy. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Governor Reynolds. Thank you, Secretary Perdue. Thank you, the senators. And Secretary Perdue, especially thank you for facilitating the masks. I know the whole federal government was behind making that happen, but it's a huge help, and it allowed us to require our associates to have masks on across our whole company. So a huge appreciation. When I hear everybody talking today, one of the things that is heart-wrenching, a couple of weeks ago we had to put limits on meat purchasing because we were finding a lot of customers stockpiling and buying way more than was needed. So we had to put limits on, and it's just heart-wrenching when you hear the stories of farmers not being able and not having the plants open. And, it's appreciated and looking forward with the plants getting reopened so that we can take those limits off and people get comfortable buying what's needed so that we can get our supply chain working together. One of the other things, Kroger operates 35 manufacturing plants, about 2,800 stores, over about 50 warehouses. And one of the things over the last 8 weeks, we've learned an awful lot about how to operate in this environment, to do everything we can to keep our associates safe and our customers safe. And one of the things that we did a couple of weeks ago was decided to share our internal documentation on the things that we had done for others on our website that we support, and every week we update that. And one of the things we're finding is small businesses, it's incredibly helpful for them. Obviously, the companies around this table, we have a lot of resources to be able to help ourselves to get back on our feet and to grow, but being able to provide that to other companies is very it's uplifting and it's great to see. The other thing that we've been able to do, we're very involved in testing. We actually have partnerships with Smithfield and JBS plants in Ohio on helping them test their associates. And we are testing currently in 7 states. Next week we'll add 8 more states. And we continue to learn. And one of the things that we've done with our own associates is partnered with Microsoft to create a bot where our associates can go through to see whether they should be tested, and all our 462,000 associates have access to that. Kroger's purpose forever has been to feed the human spirit. And when you think about everything this country is going through today and what we're doing, it really is feeding the human spirit. And, on behalf of our 462,000 associates that I get to represent, we're here to serve our communities. We're here to serve our country, and we're here to help America get reopened again. And thank you for your leadership, and thank you for everybody's leadership. So, Randy, thanks for hosting us.
You bet.
Thank you, Rodney. And I just, and this is equally true for HyVee, and I was there in March when Grocery Stores of America told the President of the United States, we're not closing. and you stayed open, and all those incredible employees coming to work every single day. I hope you both will just tell them how grateful the American people are every day for what our grocers and all their great workers have done throughout this epidemic. Great job, really.
Well, with that, we will just wind down. Just a couple of comments. I think on the food retail side of the business, there's been a couple of buzzwords for quite some time, 2 or 3 years before that, and that was evolution and disruption. And our whole business has been constantly evolving and very disrupted, and then COVID-19 happened. And I think there's, an old saying about from hardship and crisis can come great innovation. And one of the things that I've seen across the supply chain on all sides of it, retailers like Rodney's company posting the help for the smaller chains to be able to take care of their employees and spring back. A lot of our grocery stores have been buying food from restaurants and selling it out of the stores because we know that that's all they can do. And so you've seen great collaboration. You've seen great innovation around supply chain. I think you've seen a lot of the problems on the supply chain and all aspects of it that have been kind of exacerbated right now and are being studied. Just-in-time inventories, the dual supply chain. You have product that's being produced and sourced for restaurants. We noticed over 3 years ago, food away from home surpassed food at home. And so we are very invested in food service. And so how we route those supply chains back into our food stores. We've had a great relationship, I know Rodney has too, with a company like Cisco. Kevin Horkin, the CEO of Cisco, we've worked with them. And so there's been great resourcefulness, and I think that's one of the things that I have found from this. I said to Rodney earlier when we were talking, the number of learnings that we've had within our companies of things that have found new efficiencies, new ways of doing things that will last and be here now forever. We'll just change how we do those things. And so I think that out of this crisis will come good in the end. And with that, I appreciate you being here today, bringing all of us together and your great leadership. And to put us all here to talk just a little bit, I think it'll make a difference and help. So thank you very much, sir.
Randy, thank you for bringing everyone together. Thank you to all of the participants of the panel. I know I speak on behalf of your two great senators and your governor when I say this has been an informative and more than a little inspiring time. And I look forward to reporting back to the president on our conversation today. But more than anything else, I really came to Iowa today just to say thank you. So I'm especially grateful to have so many members of your team present here, and I hope anyone that might be looking online who's been any part of this, from the farm to the grocery store, understands how grateful the American people are for each and every one of you. You've done an incredible job keeping food on the table in the midst of a national crisis. And I think it may well turn out to be your finest hour. It was a time when an industry stepped up and met the moment at some personal risk to themselves, whether it be people working in the meat processing plant or whether it be people running cash registers or people traveling around the country, driving trucks or working in warehouses. People have considered others more important than themselves. And you've risen to the challenge. So on behalf of the President of the United States and the American people, thank you. And I just know in my heart of hearts when I see the resolve and the strength of the people in this industry, when I hear the strength that we heard today at that beautiful little church nearby, that with God's grace and with the strength of the American people, we're going to get through this. And we're going to come out stronger, more prosperous than ever before. As the saying goes, we're going to make America great again. Again. So thank you all very much, and God bless you.
All right, once again, Vice President Mike Pence there saying thank you to all of those workers. HyVee, for some of you who may not be familiar, is a grocery store chain in the Midwest. They have some stores in Iowa, which is where Pence has been visiting around here today, but also in Minnesota, South Dakota. I believe I saw even some down in Missouri, Kansas area. So again, HyVee, just one of those essential stores that has been open and helping get people what they need during coronavirus. All right, let's go and take a live look at the latest numbers here in the United States of America. We are going to be giving you a look from the Johns Hopkins University